Let's talk about the war that is happening now between Donald Trump and the intelligence community. Yesterday, we talked about this story that alleges Russia has a blackmail file on Trump. Of course, Donald Trump has admitted that he was briefed about it. However, he has denied the contents of that blackmail file. We've also heard anecdotally from different people, including spokespeople on the Russian side. We've heard from people on the Trump team, et cetera, about the contents. But what we have increasingly here, I would call it a disagreement, but it's really more than that, between Donald Trump and the intelligence community. You'll remember last week, Donald Trump said I was supposed to be briefed about Russian hacking on Tuesday, and now they changed it on me and it's not happening until Friday. And then we heard from intelligence officials, no, that's a lie. The hearing was always scheduled for Friday. Donald Trump is lying. And now we are hearing from intelligence agencies that Donald Trump also lied yesterday during his press conference about the briefing relating to the supposed blackmail file. The claims of the 35-page dossier released by BuzzFeed were summarized in a 2-page synopsis. Donald Trump was briefed about that, and Barack Obama was briefed about that. And there was a suggestion made during the press conference that Donald Trump gave yesterday that it's intelligence agencies that are responsible for that story going public. Trump went after the U.S. intelligence agencies, saying they're responsible for leaking, quote, nonsense to the media. This would be a tremendous blot on their record. He made an allusion to Nazi Germany, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we have now heard from the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, who says, no, Donald, the intelligence community did not leak the claims about Russia holding compromising personal information, compromising financial information. The intelligence community just didn't leak it. And there is major tension, Pat, here between Trump and the intelligence agencies that he will not only be at the top of the organizational chart for starting in, 8 days, but he will be depending on the briefings of these agencies to make life or death decisions. Maybe not life or death for him, but for many, many people. How is this relationship going to work?
Yeah, and I think by attacking these agencies, he's also doing a very poor job of separating the leadership from the folks on the ground, because there are plenty of people in the FBI, the CIA, who put their lives on the line every day, and it's going to be seen as very offensive to them, especially coming from the person who's going to be leading those organizations in 8 days.
And by the way, for all of the it's totally fake people that are out there, Clapper's statement now connected with Donald Trump at the conference yesterday saying that he was briefed about this. This confirms what the initial story was from CNN. Remember, Donald Trump saying, oh, CNN, you're fake news because of the story that you ran. CNN said that Trump and Obama were briefed about this. They never said the contents of the 35 pages are true. They never even went into the details of those 35 pages. We now have confirmation from both James Clapper and Donald Trump that the briefing took place. Nobody's mentioning, Pat, that, by the way, it's not fake news. CNN was exactly right.
Yeah, and in the same way that I think he's falsely equating some of the more outrageous parts of that story with the more credible parts, he's also equating what BuzzFeed reported to what CNN is reporting.
Drastically different stories, drastically different reports from BuzzFeed and from CNN. Thinking more about this relationship between Trump and the intelligence community, if Trump needs to decide whether to drone someone in the Middle East, and it's all based on reports from the same people that he thinks are totally untrustworthy, how does that work? How will Donald Trump decide what's trustworthy and what isn't? Is anything about Trump from the intelligence community unreliable, but any other topics he believes that the intelligence community is totally reliable on? I mean, it's a totally untenable situation. I don't know how you manage presidential decisions if you're going in with this opinion of the intelligence community.
I think that could be one of the more silver linings here, though, because if there are neocons in these intelligence communities that are trying to sell him a war, I'm not saying that's what happened with Iraq and the CIA.
No.
But if that were to happen, maybe he wouldn't take in that information as seriously.
This skepticism of Trump is represented in other areas. For example, we did the story about, in spite of the Secret Service being the most well-trained entity for protecting the president, arguably in the world, Trump still wants his own private security with a nearly 60-year-old head of security who's beyond the retirement age for Secret Service agents on the president's security detail. in every instance, it's all backwards, right? Forcing in a nearly 60-year-old security guard because you don't want just Secret Service, saying that you are going to not trust the intelligence community unless you determine that they are trustworthy based on their record in terms of who did what in terms of Russian hacking, et cetera, et cetera. We've never really seen anything like this, but for the Trumpists, it's a positive thing because for all the criticisms of Trump that we've levied over the last year plus, there's a sort of genius in what Trump has done. He's created a narrative where anything crazy that he does or any lie that he tells is treated as heroic because his followers have been primed to believe that media is lying. Any departure from protocol that Trump wants, like, for example, maintaining his own private security in addition to Secret Service, it's going your own way. Trump won't be coerced by the establishment. There's a sort of brilliance that Trump has set up where anything insane he does, many Trumpists will say, see, that's the independent thinking that we like.
Yeah, even if it turns out to be counterproductive, because sometimes his private security will conflict with what the Secret Service is doing.
Yeah.
And also now he can't really point to any media organizations and view them as trustworthy.
Well, Breitbart. After calling
Drudge
CNN
Report.
fake news yesterday, he then went to Breitbart. We'll have a clip of that a little bit later. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show's on Twitter at David Pakman Show. We'll take a break and be back with a lot more after this. Today's episode of the David Pakman Show is brought to you in part by Blue Apron. Blue Apron, I've talked about food deserts before and the lack of available fresh food in many of these food deserts. And one of the great things about Blue Apron is that it can be delivered to 99% of the continental US and 99.5% of food deserts. And when you combine that with the reality that you get the exact amount of each ingredient required for a recipe, we're talking about reducing food waste while giving people in many parts of the country where it's difficult to access fresh and varied food, access to that fresh and varied food. Some of the meals available through Blue Apron in January are, number one, spicy shrimp and Korean rice cakes with cabbage. I made this last week. Loved it. Very, very good. Also, spaghetti squash and marinara with mushroom and garlic knots. You can try this week's menu for free by going to blueapron.com/Pakman. Check it out. Try it today.